Now, so with Rokash versus Val, we're gonna pretty much go into each state and then talk about who will win if it's like base form, partial talent. You feel me, etc., etc. Full state. And we'll go from there. Now, essentially, what everyone talks about with the Rokash versus Val situation is just basically that the unrefined goal of Anu Anak prevented Val from making any moves. So basically, the gold from unrefined gold from Anu Anak specifically is not something that Rokash can manipulate. It's something that just goes around his body like a outer shell, like a hide, when he enters his state form. So now that's not really something that can be really used in battle. So when you think about that, if Val was to impale Rokash, yeah, that blood would oxidize, thus allowing that blood to pretty much go, pretty much disperse, pretty much making it useless. And Val himself, if all of that blood is connected to him, then he would have a problem if a ton of it gets corrupted. But we do see that dothaneel, you feel me? Dothaneel himself pretty much creates all of these blood xenomorph like creatures. So it would more affect dothaneel, in which it would inherently then affect Val. So yeah, it's poisonous, but it's only poisonous in large doses. In which, since he can't create more of it, it's something that's only created from his talent itself. That's not really a big factor in this fight. So now, base to base, we see Rokash have a ton of fights in his base. He usually only utilizes the corrosion portion of Anu Anak in his base. Although he didn't have the defensive portion of his talent, we're gonna still include the defensive portion in this. So if they were to fight base to base, Rokash has both portions of his talent, and Val is fighting base as well. We see in base form, Val is able to inherently allow himself to be pulled into Tomas and cut Tomas, which is something that has its own gravitational pull, which goes to show not only Val's adaptability, but also Val's deductive capability as well. Rokash has more of an animalistic style in which he goes based off instinct. Yeah, he does strategize in regards to how he dissects his opponent, but not how he dissects the talent of his opponent. It's usually just as simple as dodge. So most of the attacks that Rokash pose in base form, where he's only using the corrosion portion of his talent, he is unable to actually. He's able to do range attacks and melee attacks with the corrosion. However, Val's speed would allow him to dodge out of the way, thus nullifying the ability itself. Because as long as you don't get hit with the Anu Anak and you know you can't defend against it, then at that point you wouldn't really be able. That ability becomes useless because he has a similar Gaki and a similar outlook on fighting, where he typically he rather dodge an attack than counter or parry an attack. He only parries if necessary. So when he sees a flying slash coming at him far away, he'll be able to dodge that attack even in base form. So given that before he released most of his talent or a piece of his talent against Leo, he was fighting the strongest at the time. He was fighting Rokash at the time as well. So he would still be able to outclass Rokash just due to the opponents we see him face in his base form. Now, partial release of the talent, that's when Rokash pretty much gains the little Anu Agnak like ears or horns. He had the little sleeve that's hanging from his hair. And Val pretty much cuts his forearm open and unleashed Dothaneel's two arms. This then allows Val to have what, 4 swords, and allow him to defend himself and attack at 4 different angles. And so, although Rokash is able to tank a explosion up to 3 nukes in regards to his defense, Val ability is not necessarily that. He doesn't have the destructive capabilities in regards to his attack for his partial release. His abilities come into play more of piercing. So even if they began to pretty much stalemate each other in regards to melee combat, if Rokash were to bag away, it still pretty much would allow Val to dash in. They kind of stalemate each other, just like they stalemate each other. Well, technically, in base form, Val wins in base form, to be honest with you. But in partial release form, they stalemate each other just because of the amp and strength that Rokash got, and that all Val gets is an extra pair of arms. Now, in this one, it's kind of harder to do because at this point, technically, Rokash would be in his 4 talent form. Wow. Dothaneel. Well, let me go back. Let me go back because now, even in partial release, because if you think about the partial release as for Val, as Dothaneel himself being revealed completely instead of just the 4 arms, because base Val would technically be Dothaneel with just his hands, and then partial release would be Dothaneel coming out to play himself, meaning that Val has a larger range of attack, and then he's able to, although Dothaneel at that point will get cut down to an atomic level, the chi will still get absorbed, meaning the scale of Val's attack will be a lot larger, which will go to show that Rokash would lose in partial state as well. Because at that point, he doesn't have the unrefined gold associated with his person, on his person like a hide. He doesn't have that on him at that time. He still technically has his Kimio skin revealed. So Val would technically have the upper hand. Even if he cuts one portion, we see that Yorn was able to freeze a piece of the blood, and also he was able to cut off a piece of the head for the xenomorph as well, for the blood construct. So, but Val was still able to manipulate the piece that wasn't cut to make small piercing or small spears or needles out of the blood that he was able, or Dothaneel was able to manipulate by himself, while Val was still able to attack. So not only do Rokash have to deal with Dothaneel and his large scale attacks, he has to deal with Val, his deductive capabilities, his abilities to adapt, and also his ability to pretty much counterattack. So in that regard, I do believe that the moment Val blood pierces Rokash, he would lose in partial state. So base form, Val wins. Partial release of his talent, Val wins. And if you, now let's talk about the full release of both of their talents. We have the aspect of Rokash going into his gaining his defensive portion back and going into his state form. Now, at this time, technically, all of the defense of the state form was technically drained. That's why he didn't really have that high of a defense when you look at the state form. However, when you look at the actual form, as he's unable to produce the unrefined gold, is just a part of the hide, then Val going into his full state mode would actually be a complete stump. You feel me? Because when Rokash transform and when Val transform, the chi being displayed is completely different. Val chi being released is seen from outer space, similar to how Shay goes into a sports state, while Rokash just transforms into his state form. Similar to how Ryu Gazgan just transformed into his state form, where there's not an explosion of chi, there's just an instant transformation. So therefore, at that point, Val chi output is higher than Rokash. Now, at this point, Val then gains access to an even larger tier of xenomorph than he showed before. As you can see with the picture around me, this is pretty much Val after he releases his state, and dothaneel is pretty much at full power. Now he gains a larger scale attack, but he also gains an ability called Blood Moon, in which it kills. It has the ability to kill an entire army, in which if this is a battle of this aptitude, I don't think Rokash would be able to get out of the range of Blood Moon, because even Shay at the time wasn't able to get out of the range. So unless you have an extra life, you wouldn't really be able to do too much. You can go with the aspect that if all of those spears pierce Rokash, they would be able to poison Val. However, at that point, even though Val is poisoned or dothaneel is poisoned indirectly, and that will make Val poison, technically Val will heal before dothaneel will heal, because you see with Anton, they said that Kong is still hurt, and we see Kong is still hurt when he does the B shift 75%. Kong is still poisoned, but Anton is able to fight, and he doesn't show any signs of being poisoned. So they was able to cure poison, but it's hard to cure poison chi. So even if you were to affect dothaneel and inadvertently affect Val through Blood Moon or through all this blood piercing Rokash would still be unalive before Val would be unalive. It's a ton of blood hitting him, but the mass is not big enough for Val to actually be unalive. So this would cause Val to be poisoned, which would then weaken his army and lower the chance of him being able to revive Thanatos, or even if he is able to go the extra mile and, let's say, hit a lucky hit. Not only does the automatic defense for Anu Ankh is not an atomics skill, meaning it doesn't cut at that top level, it's just a regular blast attack, so it could technically eviscerate the xenomorph's head or a piece of them. However, the aspect of everywhere being his coffin and him having that automatic defense, that actually is more of a hindrance, because now he has to focus on his chi being absorbed from them blasts and being used against them, and he has to focus on rebuilding those blasts for his defense as well. So the automatic defense kind of worked against Rokash in this situation as well. So given, let's say he can unalive Val, he can use blood sacrifice, where he pretty much can use all of his blood in this moon that he in himself, that he pretty much saved over the centuries to gain another life. However, when you think about the Yorn fight, Yorn had to expel unquantifiable amount of chi to be able to actually force Val to use all of the blood, just going to show that there is a chance that there's a limit to how much it can absorb before he can be unalive still. So if the damage threshold surpassed the amount of blood that he had, then he could technically be unalive. But if it's under the amount of blood that he has, then technically he can still be able to fight, because with him being drained from this ability of Yorn's, the Michigan Nail Hammer, then at that point, then Val was alive but wasn't able to fight. But Rokash hasn't displayed anything to be able to be on this tier of power, even if he were to combine all of his abilities together. But the way that dothaneel is utilized, how versatile it is, how large scale the attacks are, yeah, he can shoot a bunch of random corrosion blasts. However, all of that chi will get absorbed and then essentially be used against Rokash. So Rokash essentially has no chance in beating Val. If they're in base, dothaneel extra arm gives him the advantage. The manipulation of blood still gives him the advantage. Partial reliefs, which means dothaneel is out all the way, and Rokash only has the little jackal ears and the little tassels. Dothaneel is still able to absorb all of Rokash's chi attacks, so all of Rokash's chi is basically being used against him, and he loses the ability to manipulate that chi once dothaneel gets a hold of it. If they go into full release, then Val gets the ability to pretty much come back to life and he gets even larger scale abilities. He's able to attack simultaneously. I forgot to mention that in the partial release, he's able to attack differently without dothaneel attached as well. So you're pretty much fighting the 2v1 with people who's stronger than you. Then you have the full release state where he has Blood Moon. That's pretty much an automatic GG for any army that he comes across. And if it's a focus target, then at that point, since Rokash doesn't necessarily have the proper defense to withstand piercing attacks, as you can see, that's pretty much how he was unalive. Muramasa, enhanced by an Illios flame thrust attack, was able to bypass his defensive thruster. So a focused attack from a mass of blood will be able to pierce Rokash. A thrust attack from Val's dothaneel freeform sword will be able to thrust him. And whatever damage that Rokash get, he doesn't have a healing factor, but Val's blood also corrodes him. So there's not really much of a chance for Rokash to be able to beat Val. But what do you guys think? Is Rokash, does he have a chance even with his unrefined goal, or was that just Val's way of saying that he needs to be at 100% and he doesn't have time for any more setbacks? He needs his master to be alive. But anyway, that's all I got for this video. Let me know what you guys think. It's been your boy Wolf Nara. Like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube thingy. I'm out.
You know we like foreign shit, call it Cabo Cardia. From Korea to Japan, look like baller body, yeah. Know I'm feeling like the man when it's cushy in the air. Know I'm kissing on her neck, now her tushy in the air. You know niggas talking shit, but we fried and we don't care. You know I am so unique, you can't clone me, I'm too rare. My aesthetic be too sleek, gentleman, I'm debonair.